day, you don't need a truck with 500 kilometers of autonomy because you are carrying heavy batteries and you're not making use of that. So at the national level, 85% of the load of the vehicles, I mean, 85% of the charging of those vehicles is done in the companies, on the homes, because and that it's good to have charging facilities or charging stations because it gives us more mobility, and it's something that we actually study, this type of purchase and how much do you need from the willingness of the citizens and to encourage mobility. Are we prepared to leave the traditional vehicle behind? The first thing I would like to say is that from the direction of energy, we encouraged voluntary changes. I mean, this is not a prohibition, but an incentive. So that's why it depends on the use we're going to make of that vehicle and at the level of training. There is a program with the German chamber to train professionals together the with UDU and the University of Labor. And for example, in the following days, the fireman department will be trained in this respect, and also crane workers will also be trained. So with the technical commission of Salto Grande, which is a dam, they're also going to be trained in this respect in order to disseminate electric mobility. And also there is another program that is called Efficient Towns or Locations, because this year 80% of locations or towns in the country will be favored with this kind of incentive. We also have a program of shared bicycles and also the possibility to manage residues through the electric mobility. So a small electric vehicle maybe, I mean, doesn't need a charging station because they can actually, as we mentioned, charge their own vehicle at home, and this is actually taught at schools. And there are also different programs at secondary level where all kinds of students participate in these kinds of contests, and so there is a lot of information being disseminated. Okay, because as we mentioned, if we have a vehicle and we don't need to drive long distances, this is not efficient. Okay, so thank you very much to the four of you. Marcela, would you like to say something? Yes, just to mention that at the beginning, it's necessary to start this deep dialogue with the experts, with the companies to assess the solutions of the different fleets because they are all different. They have different mileage or they require different batteries with different capacities. And so the important thing is to be advised with experts. We have had different debates in different countries with the stakeholders when they were revising the project, and we helped them to migrate to electric mobility in an intelligent way, because sometimes the fleet accelerated to turn into electric mobility, and then the batteries or the chargers that they had were not the appropriate ones, and so that affected and they had to incur in higher costs. So now we are spreading software solutions where you can see the different charging stations or assets and see if all the fleet is charged, and that can be done in a smart way. And we see that there are savings of about 40% with respect to fleets that do not use that type of technology. So this is the educational part that has to be developed, and that's what we do, advising different fleets with different experts, also giving support on renewable energies. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that it's also necessary to visualize, to show all the results of these pilot plans. There are about 80 electric trucks driving along in Uruguay, but how do we see the benefits? Okay, so we should show that those success stories with the savings, with the mileage they drive. So we have to be surrounded by experts, include technology, and visualize the results. And as Sebastian mentioned, when we see our neighbor using an electric vehicle, and so how he did it, and this is good. So thank you very much to the four of you. Thank you, and thank you to El País for creating this type of events that help us to encourage the transformation of the transportation matrix. Thank you very much.
Nosotros seguimos adelante ahora con el panel 2 de esta mañana, Ciudades Sostenibles. Para explicar un poco de qué vamos a hablar acá, uno de los 17 objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, los ODS, que para quien no le tenga claro es un documento elaborado por Naciones Unidas que se estableció como un plan global a ser cumplido por los países en 2030. Uno de esos 17 objetivos, el 11, es la construcción de ciudades y comunidades sostenibles. Es decir, incluir la sostenibilidad y una evaluación ambiental estratégica en la planificación de las ciudades. En este panel vamos a intentar explicar de qué hablamos cuando hablamos de ciudades sostenibles, cómo se logra esto en un país como Uruguay y qué hace falta también para poder promover el desarrollo de este tipo de políticas públicas. Nos acompañan para esto Rina, arquitecta, urbanista y fundadora de Studio Diversity, bienvenida. Martín Piñeiro, consultor en movilidad sostenible y transición energética. Bueno, Paloma Nieto, que acaba de subir, arquitecta y docente, actualmente integrante del Centro de Sustentabilidad de FADU, de la UDELAR, y también trabaja en el Ministerio de Ambiente, aunque hoy viene con el gorro académico. Marcelo Metediera, buenos días, director general de Tránsito y de Transporte de la Intendencia de Canelones. No sé si está Martín por ahí. Lo esperamos unos minutitos. Buenísimo. Bienvenido, Martín.
Ya.
En la introducción estaba hablando un poco de qué hablábamos cuando hablábamos de ciudades sostenibles y un poco enmarcarlo en esto de que es uno de los 17 objetivos de desarrollo sostenible de las Naciones Unidas. Para dejar bien en claro el concepto, le quería dar la bienvenida a Paloma, que no solo es arquitecta especializada en temas ambientales, sino que también trabaja en la UDELAR y en el Ministerio de Ambiente. Paloma, quería preguntarte, ¿qué rol juegan las ciudades y la planificación urbana en la adaptación al cambio climático?
Bien, buenos días a todos primero y gracias por invitarme a mí a la facultad para estar aquí. Pensando en lo que es una ciudad sostenible, ¿verdad? Que es uno de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, el 11. Una ciudad sostenible implica, por un lado, generar condiciones de vida buenas para todas las personas, acceso a vivienda, a servicios, infraestructura en forma equitativa para todos. Pensar también en la protección del patrimonio natural y cultural. Y también una ciudad sostenible implica disminuir los impactos ambientales que generan las ciudades, ¿no? Entonces, esto se puede pensar como que la ciudad como si fuera un ser vivo que de alguna forma necesita recursos para vivir y después genera desechos a partir de los procesos que genera. Entonces, pensar en una ciudad sostenible desde el punto de vista ambiental implica que la ciudad de alguna forma consuma menos recursos, sea más eficiente en procesarlos y de alguna forma genere menos residuos, desechos en formatos de emisiones que pueden ser gaseosas, que pueden ser residuos sólidos, y en esto está muy vinculado el tema de la movilidad también. Entonces, bueno, el tema de la eficiencia en el diseño de la ciudad es muy importante. Y acá se empieza a atar también el tema del cambio climático. Una ciudad sostenible tiene también que poder colaborar con la mitigación y con la adaptación al cambio climático. Una ciudad sostenible tiene que poder, y ahora retomo eso en base a la pregunta que tú me decías, también tiene que poder contar con una movilidad sostenible, que lo vamos a trabajar en el panel, pero que, como decían también los compañeros anteriores, trasciende solo el hecho de la eficiencia energética, sino que tiene que estar pensada en función del diseño urbano, de las infraestructuras, de cómo se organizan los usos en las ciudades, para que todas las personas puedan desplazarse, ¿no? Que sea inclusiva, y que se promuevan distintos modos de transporte. Entonces, también una ciudad sostenible, nos recuerdan los ODS, tiene que ser una ciudad en la cual participen los distintos actores en la toma de decisión, ¿no? Esto es otra cosa en la cual se hace mucho énfasis. Y en relación al cambio climático, las ciudades juegan un rol súper importante. En las ciudades hoy por hoy viven aproximadamente la mitad de la población mundial, y ellas son responsables del 70% de las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, ¿no? Que se generan a nivel mundial. Entonces, juegan, por un lado, un rol clave en el control de emisiones que hacemos, y ahí es súper importante el peso, en particular en nuestro país, aunque tiene una matriz limpia, pero que tiene la movilidad en la generación de emisiones, que está alrededor de un 70%, entonces repensar las infraestructuras y los modos de transporte y cómo diseñamos la ciudad para que estas emisiones disminuyan es un aspecto clave, y el Uruguay tiene acuerdos y se ha propuesto mejorar eso, y bueno, creo que también por eso estamos todos hoy acá.
Eso te quería preguntar, perdona que te interrumpa, pero esa necesidad de tener una mirada integral y precisar políticas públicas para llevar esto adelante, ¿cómo está Uruguay pensando en esto a nivel del país hoy? ¿Hay alguna estrategia a nivel nacional o va quedando en esfuerzos individuales según cada intendencia, según cada departamento?
Mira, Uruguay, el primer paso de cara como a las ciudades sostenibles o territorios sostenibles vinculados a la planificación urbana, el primer gran paso lo dio con la aprobación de la ley 18.308, que es la Ley de Ordenamiento Territorial y Desarrollo Sostenible, en el año 2008. En su diseño, la ley tiene una mirada de sostenibilidad en distintos aspectos, y además prevé que todos los planes que se hagan, que son hechos de parte de las intendencias, de los gobiernos departamentales, tengan una evaluación ambiental estratégica. De alguna forma ahí se trata de incorporar la dimensión ambiental en la toma de decisiones asociada a la planificación, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, ahí se junta un poco el diseño urbano con esta mirada sostenible. Después el país ha avanzado en forma sectorial también, con distintas políticas y programas que tienen que ver con residuos, con planeamiento internacional, planes nacionales de adaptación de ciudades al cambio climático, planes de movilidad sostenible, a incorporar distintas dimensiones de la sostenibilidad, pero en forma sectorial. Todo contribuye, pero lo que quedó por el camino, que se empezó en el año 2008, fue el inicio de la elaboración de una estrategia nacional de ciudades sostenibles, que era un ámbito de coordinación, de alguna forma, de todas estas cuestiones, que facilitaba también el intercambio entre actores, y bueno, podría generar como una mirada más a largo plazo con metas concretas y lineamientos. Bueno, en eso se estuvo avanzando, pero ahora, hasta donde yo sé, está en stand-by.
¿Y qué tanto se precisa? ¿Qué tanto se precisa una estrategia así a nivel país y de
Yo
política
creo
de Estado?
que es importante en el sentido de esto, de poder orientar y poder ayudar a la implementación, ¿no? Porque creo que el país ha crecido mucho en normativa, creo que tiene planificación, pero que todavía tenemos un reto importante en poder implementar estas cuestiones, ¿no? Y poder coordinar con distintos actores y las distintas miradas sectoriales. Y en eso aprovecho también desde mi rol en la universidad, también la disciplina, ¿no? Tiene un desafío en cómo incorporar estas cosas en la planificación y en el diseño de las ciudades. Bueno, desde hace unos años la facultad también está trabajando en esto, porque creo que los actores, es importante llegar a todos los actores, ¿no? No solo en el nivel político, que es súper importante, pero también el que construye, el que diseña y los pobladores, los usuarios de estas infraestructuras y ciudades.
Claro. Cuando hablamos de ciudades sostenibles y pensamos en todos estos conceptos que Paloma nos estaba explicando recién, siempre nos vamos a casos de ejemplo como Ámsterdam, París o los países nórdicos. Martín, te quería preguntar por tu experiencia laboral tanto en Uruguay como en el exterior. ¿A quién puede mirar Uruguay como ejemplo? ¿Puede realmente mirar estos países que decíamos o es muy ambicioso de su parte?
A ver, se puede mirar, hay que ubicarse en la realidad uruguaya, pero se puede mirar, el desafío va más en lo cultural que en otros temas, usar transporte público, andar en bicicleta, son decisiones personales y hay una cuota de cosa cultural importante. Me gusta hablar del nuevo paradigma de la movilidad sostenible, pues es un concepto simple y que explica un montón de cosas y que sirve un poco como guía también de cosas a hacer, y es evitar, a ver, estamos hablando de movilidad y de descarbonizar la movilidad. Entonces, lo primero es evitar, digamos, el mejor viaje, el viaje menos, que menos emisiones genera, es el viaje que no se hace. Y que no se malentienda, el viaje que no se hace es justamente promover estos conceptos de la ciudad de los 15 minutos, por ejemplo, donde una persona en un medio urbano denso, agradable, tiene que ser agradable, la persona tiene que querer vivir ahí, tenga resueltas sus necesidades diarias a la vuelta de su casa. Eso evita muchos viajes. El segundo punto del concepto es el cambiar la forma que nos movemos. Y ahí me gusta traer el caso de Holanda, porque siempre que se habla de Holanda se piensa en la cultura de los holandeses y cómo usan la bicicleta y qué sé yo, como que los holandeses son distintos, y en realidad hay que ubicarse en la Holanda de posguerra, digamos años 50, 60, una industria del automóvil que empezaba a ofrecer producto barato, producto distinto, poder adquisitivo del holandés bueno, esas ciudades se hicieron un caos, eran inviables. Entonces ahí hubo política pública, porque no había más remedio, que generó ese cambio, generó esa transformación, y bueno, hoy Holanda es ejemplo, hoy cultural, pero hubo política pública de entrada y naturalmente que hubo resistencia en las personas. Para cambiar también se necesita, a ver, por ejemplo, siempre decimos lo costoso que son algunas iniciativas de esquemas de bici pública y que se necesitan subsidios muy fuertes y demás. Si queremos que alivianar el tránsito, la bicicleta es una herramienta, y para que se ande en bicicleta se necesita generar ambiente. Y si tú bajás la velocidad máxima en la que se puede transitar en Montevideo, a niveles que estadísticamente está demostrado que baja mucho la siniestralidad y la gente se empieza a sentir segura, automáticamente se empieza a utilizar la bicicleta. Muchos de nosotros seguramente hemos viajado a lugares donde hay esquemas de bici pública y usamos las bicicletas y las usamos con frío, con nieve.
Claro. Ahora, para eso se precisa infraestructura, ¿no? Además de otro montón de cosas, además de la cultura, además de reglas de tránsito. ¿Qué rol juegan o jugaron en su momento, en estos casos de ejemplo que mencionabas, los incentivos económicos, impositivos, regulatorios?
Te quería terminar el concepto del paradigma El tercero es el mejorar. Y ahí recién es cuando entra la movilidad eléctrica, digamos, que el ómnibus sea eléctrico, que el vehículo de logística que tiene que seguir estando sea eléctrico, los combustibles, los e-fuels que se está hablando tanto ahora, y bueno, Europa un poco como que está dando espacio para que eso siga. Ahí viene el cambio tecnológico, es recién la última pata. La importancia de los subsidios es a ver, trascendental. En Uruguay toda la movilidad eléctrica está de una forma u otra subsidiada y eso es en el mundo entero. Hay mucha creatividad, pero terminan siendo subsidios siempre para movilidad eléctrica, para desarrollo urbano es lo mismo. En Montevideo estamos viendo, por ejemplo, un avance fuerte en la construcción en la zona céntrica de la ciudad, que está bueno, cosas de calidad, y eso se hizo con un incentivo. Hay un incentivo ahí que está promoviendo que se construya. Hay algunos elementos también que que generan valor en una zona. Traigo el ejemplo del dique Mauá. El dique Mauá, si se hace algo ahí, que todos más o menos entendemos lo que se podría llegar a hacer, se va a generar valor en esa zona. Y la zona, si se tienen algunos cuidados, puede ser más agradable, más vivible, puede tener otro atractivo que quizás hoy no lo tenga, y por ahí algunas personas elijan vivir en esa zona. Hay algunos lugares donde se ve que el centro de la ciudad es la zona deseable. En Nueva York, por ejemplo, creo que el apartamento más caro está enfrente a Central Park. Mbappé, no se rían, Mbappé vive en el centro de París. Es una persona que podría elegir dónde vivir, elige vivir en el centro. Eso acá no pasa. En realidad tenemos una ciudad que es divina, tiene riqueza arquitectónica. Entonces ahí el estímulo viene por el incentivo fiscal, es clave. Pero también todas estas iniciativas tienen que tener un asidero político, digamos. La gente lo tiene que ver con buenos ojos. En París, por ejemplo, Anne Hidalgo, que es la alcaldesa de París, cerró algunas calles cuando inició, recién empezada su gobierno, cerró muchas calles, generó un caos en el tránsito. París ya era complicado. ¿Y qué pasó? Bueno, la gente protestaba, estaba todo mal, pero de a poco empezó a dejar de ir en auto al centro de París. Y hoy París es una ciudad más tranquila en cuanto al tránsito. O sea, hay que tener coraje, hay que hacer el trabajo cultural. Y bueno, por suerte tenemos una...
Rina justamente tiene experiencia en París. Preguntarte un poco cuáles son estos falsos mitos, entre comillas, a romper y por qué no, lo que hablábamos en la previa, por qué no es cierto que sea una especie de competencia o de guerra entre bicis versus autos. ¿Cómo se logra acompasar todo junto?
Sí, hay muchos malentendidos siempre en los diarios, acá en todo caso, como hay polémica, muchos malentendidos. ¿Por qué hay? Porque la gente que habla en general, ¿no? Es también las personas que son atrás de atascos, pierden mucho tiempo en atascos, pierden dinero comprando combustible y buscando estacionamiento, y además no quieren culparse y no quieren además compartir el espacio en la calle, que hoy está todo para autos, no quieren compartirlo con bicicletas y ómnibus. Pero si todos manejamos en la ciudad no funciona para nadie. Y esto es algo muy importante para entender, que mucha gente no entienda que el problema no es falta de estacionamiento o falta de vías que quieren más carriles. No es esto el problema. El problema es falta de buena movilidad. ¿Qué es una buena movilidad? Una movilidad asequible, rápida, ¿no? Barata, cómoda, sostenible y una alternativa al automóvil, porque tenemos varios modos que antes en Montevideo también teníamos tranvía, teníamos...
Because we have different ways. In the past in Uruguay, we also did. We had trams and cars and bikes, but today we only have cars. What we need is strong political willingness with leaders who can explain to people how cities work. It's not a car or a bike or a bus. We need them all. We need to make decisions depending on the time of the day, the objective of our trip. And this multimodality is only possible if we have a strong willingness to disincentivize cars. Why? Because we need that space for people, for buses, for bikes. The space we have is limited, so we need to disincentivize cars. This is the most important point for me to the transition to electric cars, which is very important today. We need to have this transition But the focus of sustainable mobility should not be electric cars, because electric cars are not going to solve the problems of getting stuck in traffic, of having accidents. Only half of the homes in Uruguay have cars, and electric cars cannot solve those problems. And they cannot solve the problem of lack of public spaces we need to live well in a community. So basically, that's what I wanted to mention. It's very important to talk about this too. We need to change this paradigm. And just to finish, I don't want to say that if there's a bike lane project, everybody that needs to travel from, I don't know, Canelones to Uruguay has to take to Montevideo has to take that lane. But it's important to share the space with others that can do it. People that want to do it by bus, we need to have a bus lane. The point is, what kind of city do we want? Do we want a dangerous city, a congested city, or do we want a safe and nice city? This is something that always generates debate because, of course, it affects all of us in our daily life. Lina was just mentioning political willingness. So, Marcelo, I'll give you the floor to know, in the specific case of the municipality of Canelones, how you're going along with this and how you're facing this challenge, whether it's political willingness or citizen willingness, because sometimes people don't understand the value of what is intended to do. So what comes first, right? The chicken or the egg? I mean, if we go on a trip and we go to cities such as Berlin or Paris, we go on a bike. But in Montevideo, we don't think about it. So first of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I think part of the key is what Martin in his presentation said, which is it's people's participation, the fact that you can involve the society in the debates or how you're going to organize the city, how people can be part of the projects that will be used. Because people have to be part of those things. Otherwise, it will just be projects that will never be used because they could not generate that final product that was needed. We have several instances of participation, something that is more academic and technical, the plans of territorial organization. There's a more technical debate that's going on there. We have some specific project. One we did with the acceleration lab of the UNPD, and others that have to do with the municipality, with traffic organizations in a comprehensive way. And I think it's very important to have comprehensive work at the national level. And that enabled us to talk to neighbors, to kids, to, I don't know, skaters that came to the debate and gave their ideas. So in Canelones, we have the whole territory divided into 30 little, what we called mini municipalities, and they build their local mobility. And that's a tool for each of those places to get organized with the people who live there to analyze mobility. We do have figures at the departmental level, but then it goes into this 30 sections. But all these 30 places, I live in one of them that is number 8, and the reality that is the social and economic reality of that place is seen in traffic, in the traffic of that area, because crashes are with pickup trucks, penalties are because people are not wearing their seat belts. So each territory had its particularity. So in the construction of each of these projects, we must include people so they can own those projects and they can reach the transformation. For example, there was a square and there was a big debate with the owner of a shop because he was not going to be able to park his car in front of the shop. Why? Because when they changed the circulation way, he had to cross the street. So amazing where we can get. If we do not own those processes and make people part of them, that's never going to change. So how are municipalities changing this? What specific projects do you have? We have two of them that are related to sustainable mobility. One, the country has made a big transformation in terms of renewable energies, so electric mobility must accompany that. We had the possibility of approving a trust of a $2 million fund to replace buses for electric buses. And that talks about public policies that are directly related to people, because the reality of Canelones, where I live with a lot of rural areas, we cannot carry out renovation plans. So this as a stimulus was fabulous. And we keep working on projects related to electric mobilities. Another one that we are working with UTE, incorporating charging stations, not only for electric cars, but also for bikes and motorcycles that you can charge there. Sometimes it seems useless, a bike or I don't know, a motorcycle, you can charge it at home. But if for some reason I couldn't do it at home, I can feel relaxed that I'm going to have other stations where I can do it at public places. And that's going to enable people to take step towards mobility. And the next one is I don't know, we've said the corridor of the coastal area. We've been working a lot on mobility surveys to know what happens to traffic at the northern part of the coast and see what we can do about it. Because many times we do the works and then we see how we solve mobility. We should do it the other way around. We're working on a mobility survey to know what people think, where people go, how they do it. And one of the questions we ask them is, are you willing to give up your space to have sustainable mobility, to prioritize, for example, lanes for buses? And those are more or less the two focus points, excuse me. But we would like to know, what do people say? We're in the reference terms. There was a question that was included in the survey, but I want to know what people think in that area. And many times this happens, and when we do presentations, we talk a lot about passenger transportation vehicles, all those who do not use it. So we talk about bike lanes, those that do not use the bike lanes. So I want to know the opinion of the neighbors that are involved in that. So Paloma, how important are these tools such as surveys to have better planning? So I believe it's essential to have people's participation, so then plans can be really implemented. And many times we have this critique because sometimes it's only on paper. So when people own processes, that implies big cultural changes. And we have seen that in cities such as Paris, Barcelona. Those are processes that have taken years. And they have improved, but it's not that they are totally accepted. And in that respect, I believe it's very important to work with the different stakeholders and especially the inhabitants of all those places. And based on that, to adapt the design of what can be sustainable mobility for each of the context, because it's not the same for everybody. Sustainable mobility is not the same here in the capital as it is in a little town in Canelones. So it's vital to have information from the people that are part of it. These are long processes, these are cultural changes, and it's key to have that information. Otherwise, change is not going to happen.
Yes, data, information, but we also have to break the myth that we have to understand that all the politicians and professionals in the world, they have understood that we have to divorce from this myth and have an independence from the traditional vehicle and aim at the public transportation and have neighborhoods where we can walk around. There is still this gap because we don't talk about it, and it's not something, for example, we can explain this to a child in 10 minutes, but there's a lot of resistance. Resistance and to this change, and because we are talking about moving people, it's not only about moving vehicles. We have to think the city for in terms of the well-being of the citizens. Do you want a city that is flooded because it's full of streets? No, people want green cities. Do you want children not to have autonomy? Because sustainability is also thinking about future generations. So all parents want their children to be autonomous, to have a safe environment. And for this, we need other type of realities than the streets that we see, like an avenue with 3 lanes. I mean, if we have a cycle lane, more spaces to walk, a space to drain rainfall, this is more integrated. And it, in that case, we would have a more resilient city. I think people would like that. But this is a debate that has to take place. It's not difficult to put it into practice, but it needs a lot of public willingness. Martin, how can we accelerate this? Because there is a consensus that this is necessary, this is what we want, but it's not only a cultural change. The concept is very nice, this concept of 15-minute cities, but if we take a bus from one place to another in Montevideo, we don't get there in 15 minutes. Okay, first, I want to mention something that the mobility in transportation has to be equal and for all, and equal, and also gender has to have gender equality. Because maybe if you take longer to get from one place to another, you will need someone to take care of your children while you get there. So mobility is also this, and also to guarantee these rights and to be able to enjoy your time. And if there is only one vehicle at home, probably the male is going to use that vehicle. So that's from the gender perspective. I disagree a little with him, with Marcelo. Imagine the mayor of Paris with the chaos there was. If she asked, what do you think if I close 30% of the streets and I make them pedestrian streets? And if she took an action on that, I mean, I think, but that is our responsibility in terms of taking decisions. That maybe we don't have all the options on the table. So what you are saying in between lines is that it's also difficult to assume the political costs with respect to these decisions that are not so friendly. I mean, yes, nobody's going to commit a political suicide with these decisions, because in theory the projects could be very nice, but the cost politically could be very high. We need to test. I mean, this is not about 10 or 20 years time planning. Let's do something now. Let's have a pilot plan. The public transportation must be something attractive to be used, because otherwise it's only used by those who need it. I mean, The trams are really nice, but VRT is not so difficult to put it into practice. To synchronize the traffic lights, that's something easy. I mean, all this security issue, many people who are moving to the outer sides of the city, it has to do with security and they are moving at a similar cost than living in the city of Montevideo. So these are issues that maybe we can take actions very quickly and we don't have to wait for a long time. We need the courage to move forward. So in the academic level and in other countries, how have these tensions or conflicts being solved between citizens and the political point of view? In many countries, there have been many pilot plans. For example, in Barcelona, they started with a super blocks project. So during some days, 4 or 5 blocks, the interior streets became pedestrian streets. So that encouraged the neighbors to carry out other activities, and people understood that they could have another type of mobility, that maybe we can leave the vehicle aside. And so this was a gradual construction with specific actions, and that they have made progress. The idea of having infrastructure for bikes, this is essential. Many people don't use the bike because they don't feel safe and they don't have the infrastructure for that. There's also a new vision in this respect, as um, Rina mentioned, the import the importance of the design of the infrastructures and how this generates other relationships with respect to the activities that can be developed, and also with respect to the adaptation to climate change. This is becoming very important. A street is also the support of an urban area with green areas. So not all the cities are the same. There are many parts of the city that where there are no sidewalks, so people cannot walk around. So how to design these spaces to promote a change and generate benefits, this is very important. And international experiences have focused on that and made research on in this respect, and also the relationship between the different means of transportation to reach from uh, uh, an urban area, suburban area of Montevideo to reach to the downtown area. So to try to have a public transportation where where I can use, or I can combine with the bike. So this implies changes, and with respect to the research, there is a social aspect that is considered, so how the population densities are related, and how the infrastructure promotes and encourages social relations in a city. And there is a very nice sentence that has to do of changing the chip, that the vehicle is not the main actor in the city. The vehicle could be a guest to the party. So this is a great challenge, and the changes have been gradual in these experiences, and it's important to know the opinion of the population. So, as I said, these have been pilot experiences that have led to changes in infrastructure. Rina, how do we assess what Paloma and Martin mentioned about accelerating this process? I agree with what she mentioned, and there is an urgency. Since there is an urgency, so the urban experiments are a good solution by having these pilots and changing the way we imagine the street, this allows, for example, a taxi driver who never went out of the car, he is going to say, okay, the street is closed, but it says open street and there are children playing on the street. So now he knows that the street is not only for him. It could be used for other things. It could be for more plants, and people can imagine something else. And they can do that easily if it's a temporary, a provision, temporary testing for a week, for example. And by doing that little by little, what happens is that in most of the cities in the world that they had this kind of experiences, once they decide that instead of defending the right of a person to drive fast on the street, we give more priority, for example, to instead of defending the car drivers, if we do something else, then people will not miss vehicles because they will rather choose this new city. That's a way of making this change. Do you see, Marcelo, that this could be feasible? One prior comment, when we talk about mobility, what is the first thing that we think about? A car. We don't consider ourselves like opening the door and going to the public space. What sidewalk do we have? How do we move around? We're part of the mobility and we're an essential part. So to understand us from that perspective will help us generate the change, and not only the desire to buy a car. I'm going to mention an example about the pilot project of static mobility we did in the Costa de Oro without the difficulties that we have in Canelones. That was replicated in different locations of Canelones. And for example, if the width of the street is sufficient to cover the parking, the circulation, and the cycle lane. So this is what in this pilot, we could include this consideration on how to move and how to incorporate different experiences. So just to conclude, I mean that the automobile industry was really hit, and I just want to mention something. The vehicle industry, we are seeing that is visualizing that its industry is going to shift to selling services, providing services and trips. And this is something positive because it's going to maintain their business, but providing a similar service because we're not going to move less. People will continue moving in the same way, but this is going to be a service provided with fewer vehicles because if we had all taken Uber to come today, the vehicles would be fewer and they would not be there standing parking in the parking lot. And so that is going to generate opportunities of recycling because we expect different things from our own vehicles that we expect there's a status issue involved. But if we think about a vehicle that we are using in the public transportation, we expect other services like safety, the cleanliness. So this is where we are, the automobile industry is shifting towards. And the policies that could implement positively to offer a good transportation system should consider this. And it will collaborate in terms to maintain a sustainable way of moving. And this is great because this is encouraged by the political sector, but it also has to be encouraged by the commercial sector. We have to be optimistic. So do you still consider that there is a status issue with the use of the car? Yes. That for that reason is that car sales have really increased. I just hope, I believe, I believe in autonomous children, not autonomous cars. And this can be achieved little by little with electric mobility. When I hear electric mobility, I think about buses. So I think we need less driving, more walking, more cycling, and better public transportation. So that's how I imagine the future. So thank you to the four of you for being here with us. And so let's have a 10-minute break, have a cup of coffee, and then start again in 10 minutes.
Creada sobre sólidas bases y con una profunda visión de futuro que sigue vigente para darte la mejor energía. Durante estos años construimos una matriz eléctrica diversificada y renovable, cuidadosa del medio ambiente, llegando hoy a que el 98% de esta provenga de fuentes renovables. Hoy vivimos una segunda transformación energética, promovemos la descarbonización en el transporte y brindamos la infraestructura para el crecimiento de la movilidad eléctrica, generando energías limpias para la producción nacional de bienes y servicios. Trabajamos para lograr un Uruguay 100% electrificado. Nuestro compromiso es con toda la sociedad y por eso trabajamos de manera sistemática para brindarte energía segura y de calidad. Nuestra pasión sigue intacta y hoy más que nunca estamos listos para asumir nuevos desafíos. UTE, 110 años transformando con energía nuestro país.
Oportunidad, del latín op, hacia, y portus, puerto. Hacia el puerto van las oportunidades y desde ahí llegan a todos. Oportunidades de 20 pies, de 40, con productos que empresas van a repartir, comercios a vender, más de 3 millones de personas a disfrutar. viajan al mundo en botellas de tanat, cortes de res o granos de arroz. También en cada carga que llega y sigue hacia otros países van oportunidades para el nuestro. Oportunidad es estar frente a algo bueno. Hoy tenemos la oportunidad de convertirnos en una gran puerta de entrada y salida del continente y pasar de ser un puerto modelo a ser un puerto hub regional. Estamos trabajando para ampliar la terminal Cuenca del Plata y sumando infraestructura para estar a la altura de los principales puertos del mundo, para recibir barcos de cualquier tamaño y bandera y así seguir generando oportunidades que queden acá. Terminal Cuenca del Plata.
We recently inaugurated a new liquid hydrogen plant in North Las Vegas, Nevada. It's our largest liquid hydrogen production facility in the world. We produce 30 tons a day of liquid hydrogen for the fuel cell electric vehicle market in California. It's a very important sector because we see this as transportation for the future. That's low carbon transportation using hydrogen. Air Liquide is a pioneer in the space. We see the investment that we made there, about a $250 million investment, as really important for the industry because it was one of the first large-scale investments for the supply of reliable hydrogen to the mobility market in California. The hydrogen we produce from this facility has the ability to supply 40,000 fuel cell electric vehicles in California. Air Liquide is a pioneer in hydrogen. We have a facility in Bécancour, Quebec, where we operate the world's largest PEM electrolyzer to produce low-carbon hydrogen for the mobility market in the northeast part of the U.S. and in Canada. A PEM electrolyzer is a way of taking water and electrolyzing it to produce hydrogen, and basically water vapor. This low-carbon source of hydrogen is very important, and it's using renewable power on the electrolyzer to produce the hydrogen.
Cuando escuchás sostenibilidad, pensás demasiado grande. Cuando sentís que debes hacer algo, pensás demasiado complicado. Espera, pensá en decisiones, más cerca. Que son grandes o pequeñas para vos, las tuyas y las de otros, las de todos los días. Ahora, aléjate un poco. Pensá en decisiones que suman a muchos más. Son millones de decisiones que poco a poco lo cambian todo, para hacerlo mejor. Ahora pensá en quiénes te pueden ayudar a decidir mejor y ahí estamos. Para que lo que te ahorrás vos se lo ahorre el planeta. Para seguir avanzando, sin dejar a nadie atrás. Y cuando escuches sostenibilidad, pienses oportunidades. En BBVA estamos poniendo a tu alcance nuevas soluciones para construir un futuro más verde e inclusivo. BBVA, creando oportunidades.
Bienvenidos nuevamente al tercer foro de movilidad sostenible presentado por el país y organizado en conjunto con la Cámara de Comercio e Industria Uruguayo-Alemana, la Cámara de Comercio e Industria Franco-Uruguaya, la Cámara Mercantil Uruguay-Italia, la Cámara de Comercio Uruguay y Países Nórdicos y la Cámara Suiza. Agradecemos también a nuestros auspiciantes UTE, ANCAP, TCP,
We would like to thank
Erliquid,
our sponsors,
BBVA,
UTE, ANCAP,
SACEM,
TCP, Air
Volvo
Liquide,
Camiones,
BVA,
Volvo Autos,
SACEM,
Guyen y
Volvo Trucks,
Regules,
Volvo
Isbel by
Automobiles,
Quantic,
Guyen
Enertrag,
Regules,
NLX
Isabel by
Way,
Quantic, Enertrac,
Nestlé y la
and
Cámara
now
de la
X-Way,
Construcción.
Nestle, and the Chamber of
Este foro
Construction.
de movilidad ha sido
This
nombrado de
forum
interés ministerial por
has
el Ministerio de
been
Transporte y Obras Públicas,
appointed
el Ministerio de
of
Ambiente, el Ministerio
ministerial
de
interest
Industria,
by the
Energía
Ministry
y
of
Minería
Transport and Public
y
Works, the
también cuenta
Ministry
con
of
el apoyo de
Environment, and the
Pacto
Ministry of
Global
Industry,
Red
Energy
Uruguay,
and Mining. It
DERES,
has the support of the
Eurocámara
Global
Uruguay
Pact
y la
Uruguay
Cámara
Network,
Española.
DERES, the
Nos
Your
pueden
Chamber
encontrar en
Uruguay,
la web
and the
del
Spanish
país,
Chamber. You can
elpaís.com.uy,
find us at home at
también a través de Facebook Live y de
elpaís.com.uy,
YouTube. Gracias
also
a
on
todos los que
Facebook
hoy de
Live
mañana
and
nos están
YouTube.
acompañando a
Thank you
través de
so much
redes.
for all of you
Bueno,
who have
bienvenida.
joined us this morning.
Vamos a dar inicio a
So,
este panel que
welcome.
va a tratar sobre
We're going
hidrógeno
to
verde y
start this
financiamiento.
panel that's
El
going to
hidrógeno
be
verde se está
on
presentando como
green
una de las
hydrogen and
alternativas de
financing. Green
descarbonización de la
hydrogen is
economía más
presented as one of the
relevantes
most
y se
relevant
viene posicionando a
decarbonization
nivel global
alternatives
como uno de los
and has
vectores
been positioning
energéticos
itself
más
globally as a
importantes.
very
Hoy de
important
temprano
energy
escuchábamos
vector.
al presidente de
At
ANCAP
the
que nos
local
comentaba un
level,
poco algunos de los proyectos en los que están trabajando a nivel local
and
de cara a
today
esta segunda
we have
transformación
heard a lot
energética
about
para
this
poder desarrollar
second
lo que es
energy
la economía del
transformation
hidrógeno.
to develop the
Para hablar
hydrogen
sobre
economy.
proyectos de hidrógeno
To
verde,
talk about
aquellos que están en carpeta y de
green
los que ya se están
hydrogen
hablando,
projects
y ver qué pasa con el financiamiento,
and to know
tenemos que
what's going
separar
to
un
happen
poco
to
qué
the
era lo que
financing,
comentábamos en la
we
previa, los
have
proyectos
to
piloto
separate
en
a
los que está
little
trabajando
bit
el gobierno
those
y también aquellos
pilot
más
projects
vinculados
the
a la
company,
exportación
the
del hidrógeno
government is
verde y sus
working
derivados,
with,
en los que están los
and
privados
those that
y que
have to
son
do
de
with
escalas
exports where
más grandes.
private companies are working
En
in
este
their
panel
large
nos
scale.
acompaña a
In
través
this
de
panel,
Zoom Aram Sander, jefe de
the
desarrollo de
following
negocios
people will be joining
internacionales
us.
en Enertrack,
Online,
Gonzalo
Mr. Adam
López,
Sander, Head of
analista de
International
desarrollo
Business
de negocios en
Development at
SACEM,
Enertrack.
María Croci,
Then
gerenta de
Gonzalo
sostenibilidad
Lopez
de
here, Business
BBVA,
Development
Rafael
Analyst at
Brain,
SACEM,
gerente
Maria
general de Air
Croci,
Liquid en
Sustainability
Uruguay, y
Manager
Juan Manuel
at
Mercant,
BBVA
socio de
Bank,
Guyer y
Rafael
Regules.
Brain, General
Quería
Manager of
empezar
Liquid, and
contigo,
Juan
Juan
Manuel
Manuel.
Mercant,
Guyer se viene posicionando
partner
como uno de
at
los
Guyer
estudios
Regules.
referentes en cuanto al
I'd like
asesoramiento
to
en
start
estos
with you,
temas
Juan
de
Manuel.
proyectos
Guya
de
has
energías
positioned
renovables
itself as
y
one of the
también de
leading
hidrógeno
firms
verde.
in terms of advising on
Dejando de lado
renewable
esto que
energy,
decíamos
energy
recién
projects, both
de
in the
los
public and
proyectos
private
piloto en los
sectors.
que está el gobierno
So
y
leaving
pasando a
aside
aquellos
those
de
pilot
dimensiones más
projects
grandes,
convened by the
¿cuál es
government
el
and
estado de
focusing on
situación
those of a larger
de los
scale,
proyectos de hidrógeno verde en Uruguay
what
hoy?
is
¿Está todo
the
en fase de
current status
proyectos? ¿Ya hay algunos en
of green
implementación?
hydrogen in Uruguay?
Bueno, por lo
Is
que yo
there
tengo
any that
entendido,
it's
están todos
already
en fase
implemented?
de proyectos.
Well, as I understand, they're all in the
Algunos un
project
poquito más avanzados que
phase.
otros, y todos
Some
viendo
of
un
them
poquito
are a
cómo
little
están
bit more
moviéndose las
advanced
distintas variables
than
que
others,
hay.
and they're seeing how the
Yo
different variables
lo
are
único
moving.
que podía decirte como
The only
introductorio,
thing
si,
that I would
si
like to
te parece, y
mention as an
agradeciendo la invitación
introduction, if you
al
agree, and of
Providencia,
course, I'd like to thank the invitation
me parece
to
que
the
es interesante que el
newspaper
país
and to
evalúe,
you. I think it's interesting for the
estando en
country
la
to
etapa en la que están,
evaluate,
digamos, qué cosas
especially
deberían
where
ocurrir
at the
a
stage
futuro
we're
para que esos
in,
proyectos se
what
concretaran.
things should happen in the
Y para no
future
hacerlo
for those
demasiado
projects to
teórico,
be a reality.
creo que
And
es valioso
in order not to
recordar lo
make
que
this
fue la
too
experiencia del
theoretical, I
desarrollo
think
de
it's
energías
valuable to
renovables.
remember the development of renewable
Uruguay en
energies,
determinado momento,
and
entre el
energies in
2005, entre
Uruguay.
el 2005 y el 2008,
At some point
hubo
between
varias cosas que
2005 and
hizo de manera
2008,
media que simultánea.
the
Aprovechó
country
una
did
coyuntura
some
internacional que
things.
era propicia,
First, it took
hubo
advantage
sentido de
of a
urgencia,
beneficial
bueno, por supuesto que
international
obviamente tenía
situation.
determinadas características como país que
Of
aún
course,
mantenemos
the
y son
country had certain
constantes,
characteristics as a
por suerte,
country, which are constant because they're present
y eso
today,
hizo
fortunately.
que se generaran
And
contratos
that
robustos, que los contratos fueran financiables.
gave
Todos esos
rise to
desarrollos requieren
robust
mucho capital, son muy
contract,
intensivos en capital.
finance
Se desarrollaron
contracts.
con esquemas
All
de
these projects are
financiamiento de
capital
proyectos bancos
intensive,
internacionales.
and
Uruguay
international
instaló
banks
una matriz
took
energética
part
que,
of this,
ha sido mencionada
and Uruguay
en
set
muchas
up
oportunidades
an
hoy
energy
y que es
matrix that has
orgullo
been
para
mentioned on
todos.
several occasions,
Y eso,
and
por
it's
supuesto, que nos
actually
da una ventaja enorme
a
en
pride
lo que
for
tiene que
us
ver con
all,
el
and that
hidrógeno.
gives us a great
Y
advantages in
cuando,
terms of
cuando se
hydrogen.
empezó con aquel proceso, digamos, estaba
And
esa duda,
when we
¿no? Es decir,
started
bueno,
with
es
that
pronto,
process,
es
there was
tarde,
that
¿cuándo
doubt.
hacerlo? Y la realidad
Uh,
es que hace
is it
poco,
too soon? Is it too late?
hace muy pocos
When to do
días,
this?
yo
Truth
estoy en el
is that a
Observatorio de
few days
Energía de la
ago,
Universidad Católica
I'm part of the
y hemos visto
Energy
estudios
Observatory of the
académicos
Catholic
que
University in
demuestran que el
Uruguay, and
costo
we
de
have seen
abastecimiento de
academic
la
studies
demanda en
that
Uruguay
show
bajó
the
y
cost
bajó
of
fuertemente,
supply
eso generó
of the demand in
un
Uruguay
ahorro para el
has
país
gone
muy
down,
importante en los
and
últimos
that
3 años, del entorno de los
meant or
1.600
implied
millones de dólares. Y eso
savings
tiene que ver un poco con
about
haberlo hecho en el momento que había que hacerlo. Las
$1,600 million
circunstancias
for the
internacionales
country. And that has to do
de
with
la situación
the
de país,
international
el grado inversor,
circumstances,
el momento que
the
the investment grade of the country, the moment the world is living. So these are moments. We don't need to get crazy about that, but we need to be there. So I believe this is a model that is now adapted to hydrogen projects and should be used. So thinking about this opportunity windows that we need to know how to take advantage of, how is Uruguay positioned in terms of regulatory measures to be able to jump on the wagon? So before going into the regulations themselves or regulatory aspects, there are certain conditions that the country has which are given or maybe, I don't know, foreseeable in a way. We have conditions of the generation of sun and wind energy in important volumes to generate this hydrogen project. We also have geographical conditions where we have a way to the Atlantic Ocean. We have stable regulations. We have an investment grade. So that's one way to look at it. The role of ANCAP has already been mentioned in this project for free competition, legal provisions regarding the regulator of all this. And we have a couple of challenges that we still need to face, a little bit more technical that have to do with tolls, firm power, etc. But I don't want to go on this so everybody can participate. So thank you, Juan Manuel. This type of development is still in its beginning phase. We've been talking about this all morning. So I would like to know about the financing. The financing of the project you're working with is a key element. So when decided as a bank where to locate the money that the citizens give, can the banking sector be a solution to this challenge of climate change in the financing of this type of projects? Well, first of all, thank you very much for the information. First of all, the 2030 agenda has been reboosted with the talk in Glasgow, and green hydrogen is one of the engines for sustainable economy. So there's a commitment from our bank to mobilization of all these macrosystems starts to go in line. And this didn't happen in the past with the SDGs, because this was a differential element between one agenda and the other, to incorporate the private sector as the mobilizer. Because actually, without financing, we can't get anywhere. Everybody knows that. So yes, definitely. So what's the role of the banking industry in making this a possibility, and specifically the BBVA Bank in this respect? So of course we're following all this pretty close. I think there are three types of analysis. There's a macro level that has to do with politics, to position ourselves as a bank for the world in this type of project. They, of course, mobilize the economy of one country. Then we have the middle one, that is all the work we do in the search for clients, people that are interested in this new exportable product. And then at the macro level, we accompany the regulatory part, and we position a European structure. We have a European bank, and that is already working on this. So we try to raise awareness and bring it to the table in Uruguay to have international references, in this case European, so they can be incorporated or they can be analyzed as a possibility to use that as our flag to make this viable. So the development of this type of project, we see it involves multiple stakeholders, the academia, the bank industry, the state. A key role is played by the
Quería
private sector. So,
que nos contaras un
Rafael,
poco
I
sobre
would
los
like you to
proyectos
welcome,
concretos en los
and
que está trabajando Air Liquide en Uruguay,
I would
uno
like you to
junto a
talk
SACEM inclusive.
about a little bit about
¿En
the
qué consisten
project
estas
that Air Liquide
iniciativas?
is
¿En qué
working
fase
on in
están?
Uruguay. One of them is together
Bueno,
with
muchas gracias,
SACEM. What
Pia.
are these
Es un
initiatives?
orgullo
What
para
phases are
Air
you
Liquide
in?
estar
So
con
thank
ustedes
you
para charlar un poco
very
de
much,
hidrógeno.
Pia. It's a
El
real
hidrógeno para Air Liquide no es
pleasure
una
for us
nueva
to be
molécula.
here.
Hace
Hydrogen for
más
Air
de 60
Liquide,
años que la
it's not something
comercializamos.
new.
Tenemos
We've
hoy en
been
día unas ventas
commercializing it for
anuales
over
de
60
2.000
years.
millones de
We've
euros por
had
millón de
annual
toneladas
turnover of
producidas. Pero que sí
2,000
está
million
cambiando
euros.
poco a
So
poco es su
what
color.
is
Estamos pasando
changing
de un
is
hidrógeno gris o a veces muy
now
gris
in the
para
past
la
we thought
producción
of
de
a
hidrógeno
gray
para la
hydrogen
industria petrolera a un hidrógeno
that
verde
was
para la
especially for the
producción
oil
por
industry, and
electrólisis
we
que no
are
emite ningún
changing
CO2.
to green
Hoy en día
hydrogen
el kit tiene un
for
electrolizador de 20 megawatts que está
vehicles that do
funcionando
not
en Canadá.
have carbon
Y
emissions.
nuestro objetivo
So
es
today
demostrar
there's
que
an
podemos
example in
traer
Canada
este tipo de
where
tecnologías en
we're
LATAM
using this,
y
and
en
our
particular
objective
en
is
Uruguay.
to bring this
Así
type
tenemos
of
dos proyectos
energies
que
or
implican a
technologies to
electrolizadores,
Latin America,
uno
especially to
de
Uruguay.
2,5
We have two
megawatts
projects,
para producir
one
hidrógeno
of
para
2.5
combustible para
megawatts to
un
produce
camión.
hydrogen
Creo que Gonzalo les va a
for
dar más detalles
fuels
en
for
esto en un
trucks,
momento.
and I'm pretty
Tenemos
sure you're going to have
otro
more
que es
details about
sensiblemente
this.
más
And then there's
grande,
another
es un
project
electrolizador
that's
entre
quite
50 y 60
larger.
megawatts y la idea sería de
It's
producir
between
alrededor de
50 and
7.000
60
toneladas al
megawatts,
año para después
and the idea is to
combinarlo con
produce
CO2.
about
La idea
7,000
es
tons a year, so we
capturar
can
CO2
combine it with
hidrogénico,
CO2, so
combinarlo
we
con
can
hidrógeno para producir
capture
metanol verde que tiene
biogenic
mucho
CO2,
potencial,
combine
como
it
explicó el
with
presidente de
the
Para
combine it so we can
nosotros es
produce
un
green
proyecto muy
hydrogen.
interesante porque tenemos de un
For
lado
us, this is a very interesting
la
project.
producción por electrólisis de hidrógeno, la
On the
captura de
one hand, we have the
CO2, la
production of
producción de
hydrogen,
metanol en
the
un mismo
capture of
complejo
CO2,
industrial y
the
también en
production
una
of
región en la
methanol
cual no
in one
tenemos este tipo de
factory,
operaciones.
and also because we
Para
don't
terminar
have that
la
kind of
respuesta a tu
operations in the
cuestión sobre la
region. And
parte
to,
de
to
las
finish
fases,
your
estamos
question is
en
about the
parte de desarrollo
stages you ask.
económico,
We are right
desarrollo
now
de
in the
ingeniería,
economic
desarrollo
development,
comercial.
the
El desafío
engineering
es
development, the
lograr hacer que
commercial
todos los
development,
planetas se
and the
alinean.
challenge
¿No es
is
así?
to have all planets
Bien,
in
muchas gracias,
line.
Rafael.
Okay, thank
Gonzalo,
you
te
very
doy la
much, Rafael.
bienvenida.
Gonzalo,
Queríamos saber un
welcome.
poco más en
And
detalle
we
de los
would like to
proyectos
know a
nuevos en
little
los que está
bit more
trabajando
in detail about the
SACEM.
new projects SACEM
El
is
año
working on.
pasado, el Ministerio de
Last
Industria,
year,
junto con la
the
ANI,
Ministry
la
of
Agencia Nacional de
Industry
Investigación
and
e Innovación, y
Energy,
el
and
LATU,
together with the
crearon el
National
Fondo Sectorial
Agency
del
on
Hidrógeno
Research
Verde como
and
una
LATU, they
plataforma para
created the
empezar a impulsar
sectorial
proyectos
fund
concretos.
for green
SACEM fue una de
hydrogen.
las
That's a
empresas
platform to
que
boost
presentó uno de estos
specific
proyectos.
projects. And
Contanos un
SACEM
poco
was
los
one of the
detalles y en
companies
qué está la
that
empresa
submitted one
trabajando
of these
hoy.
projects. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. We're very happy on behalf of the company to be here and share our experience. So, as you mentioned, Pia, SACEM submitted a project that project was together with Air Liquide and people from SEED. And this project is to provide a forestry logistic service with implementation of 17 trucks using green hydrogen. This was presented in the middle of February, and today it's still under evaluation. But within these 17 trucks, you mentioned this at the beginning, but it's important to say that the transportation sector is responsible for 2/3 of the consumption of fossil fuel at the national level. So we thought it was a very good sector to focus on. The project, in general terms, it's basically has three big blocks. The first one is for electric generation, the setting up of a solar plant that will feed the hydrogen production plant. So the hydrogen production plant has one electrolyzer where magic takes place, receives electric energy and water, and then we have hydrogen and oxygen separated. And oxygen can also be used for other things. But what we're interested in basically is the hydrogen that's produced, that it's stored at high pressure, and then through a station, it's injected into the trucks. Our project has another thing that's very interesting. And it's because it was used by a company that it's not dedicated to manufacturing trucks. They do retrofeed. What does that mean? They buy a truck, they remove all the combustion they had, they set up electrical cells, etc., and it's transformed into a hydrogen truck. So the plan and how we thought about it, and it has a lot to add at the country level, is that the first transformation will be carried out in the US. We're going to send a group of technicians so they can be trained. The total number of trucks is 17. So for the other 16, that transformation will take place at the national level here in the national territory. And that will also let the spreading of all this knowledge that the technicians will have. Okay, I would also like to welcome Ann Sander online. And in the case of Enertrav, last year, together with the local company SEG Engineering, you will be developing a project in Tacuarembó with a production of 15,000 tons of green hydrogen. You're also working in a marine project. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
No te estamos escuchando.
We can't hear you.
Sí, ahora sí. Faltó el micrófono.
Okay, I'm sorry, the mic was off. Okay, so hello, thank you very much for the invitation and to have this online presence. I'm going to choose this online presence, it's great. Okay, so we have a variety of projects in the world, but also in Uruguay. And if you talk about two specific projects that are quite different in Uruguay, I would put the focus on one of the projects because a great part of this can go to transportation, for example, marine transportation, but it's not the only use. Heavy transport, it's also a very important destination for this because the project produces methanol, and methanol is a raw material that then goes to other final destinations. And there's some variety that's indispensable for the decarbonization of things in Europe, for example. And the second one, it's technically possible. There's a route that converts methanol into sustainable aviation fuel, and that has already been set up with quotas for the European Union or in the marine sector, where 2 weeks ago, we have gotten to know about the first quotas, although they're very small, but they have started to occur. So in the European Union, large ships, 5,000 tons or more, are using in their mix renewable fuels of non-biological origin, and that includes methanol as one of the options. And that's where we have a lot of tons that are a lot bigger than our projects. So our projects are just specific compared to the demand in the European Union. Okay, Aaron, I would like to go back to Juan Manuel that you were just mentioning. Demand is a key issue in this. Is there a tension between the real needs of the market and the offer that is today? Well, there's a temporary tension for any government that needs to imagine certain incentives or new regulations. So yes, there is this temporary tension of maybe we're doing it too soon, or should we wait a little bit more? As a headline, if you have the option, you rather move first than wait for when it's too late. There are a lot of projects in the world. Uruguay it has the conditions and it's well positioned, of course, has to move fast or reasonably fast. That doesn't mean that we're going to hurry, but it means to be aware of this urgency that is happening to make those projects concrete. So within this line is that I think we should measure this pretty close and also imagine the potential this has. They are working on this concrete project, the same as IRM. The potential character of the investment for large-scale projects is huge. So similar to what? Similar to what pulp mills have been in this country. And there were some measures that were taking a long time, certain programs with benefits, and then some time for additional benefits, investment contracts, well, etc. I think just dealing with time is the tension that exists. And we have to admit this is new technology. Production costs are relatively high compared to others, for example, batteries. Price fluctuation of fossil fuels is happening, even though this is a sustainability event. It's another variable. So I would say, yes, that tension does exist, but we should not minimize it and leave it for later. So you said fossil fuels, and I want to ask Maria, BBVA has announced that it's going to be carbon neutral by 2050. So the question arises for me, how is the bank facing that challenge? And Juan Manuel is saying we have to move fast, but this is also a transition. So how is the bank facing this, the financing of these types of projects, but without stopping the financing of projects that are not that friendly to the environment? They cannot do this overnight. Well, two things are happening right now. Industries that are under scrutiny, like mining, iron ore, things like that. Those are companies that have head offices which are aware of the transformation and are trying to set things in a different way internally to adapt to that transition. So we do have examples in Uruguay. I cannot reveal those projects, but we have heavy industries that are on that path, on that transition path. And our challenge as a bank is to bring the technology, to train people, to accompany them, this public engagement in regulation, and to go along the public sector and civil society. So focus is put where it should be. So as my colleague was saying, a lot of things have to be in line for this. At the bank level, we need the regulatory aspect. We need tools at the government level that can make this viable, or with certain incentives, with transparency in this respect. So a lot of things have to take place. We are 100% dedicated to this. We have a commitment to our clients and to our own supply chain by 2030. So it's a huge challenge, and we're all together as a team, prepared and working on it, and just putting our clients first. That's our focus today. So yes, there are a lot of stakeholders that have to be in line. Uruguay has to compete. It's not alone in the world. Uruguay has to compete with other countries too. So sometimes they have incentive programs, they have different programs in more advanced places. So Rafael, we were just talking how this implies a challenge for the company, or for companies in general, but specifically for yours, in terms because you yourself end up competing with your own subsidiaries in other countries. So how do you face that challenge? Yeah, absolutely. What we see today is that Uruguay has a lot of advantages. It has a hydrogen feed that it's very ambitious. It has excellent conditions to produce green energy, but at the same time has challenges for competitiveness of its project. What happened with COVID and the Russia war against Ukraine has opened the eyes of a lot of people in the world to change the use of energy. And lots of countries are going into sustainable mobility. In one of those countries, they set up a lot of subsidy programs that can really help the projects in those countries. Example, the United States. They had two subsidy budgets. The first one was $14,000 million for CO2 sequestration, and then another one for $12,000 million for the production of green hydrogen. And we have CO2 sequestration programs. We are competing with our subsidiaries in this part of the world where they have this type of subsidy for projects that are a lot more profitable. Air Liquide, as BBVA or other companies, we have sustainability objectives. And our shareholders also want dividends every year, so we have to find balance between those two. Okay, Gonzalo, what's the model, the business model that's behind this type of project, such as the one I was mentioning before? I understand this is just the first experience in the use of green hydrogen, but are you seeing this as something that is profitable? What limitations do you see to this? Or maybe what Juan Manuel was mentioning at the beginning, you're just trying to add up to this.
Well, it's a little bit of everything. Within the business model, there are two stakeholders, the developer that provides the design, the construction, the financing, the maintenance for the solar park and for the hydrogen plant. And here the most relevant thing is that since it's an emerging technology, there is a lack of competition in terms of cost. A clear example is the one of a truck based on hydrogen that can be worth 2 or 3 or 4 times more than its equivalent in diesel or in traditional technology. So the question is, how can I overcome this lack of competition in terms of costs? For that reason, we use this sector, this green hydrogen sector fund, and we think that more projects like this are extremely important because, as Juan Manuel mentioned, there are 240 hydrogen projects in the world, and it would be very good for Uruguay to be the first to, where we open the map and we say, okay, we already have a hydrogen project, we have the regulations, and we have a path already made. Adam Sandler, how are you seeing this to satisfy or to meet the demands, the energy demands of other countries or from the European Union? How do you see this potential in Uruguay? Why do you see this potential in Uruguay?
Muy buena pregunta.
Very good question. I will try to focus on 2 or 3 things that characterize Uruguay. Why Uruguay can actually overcome some problems regarding costs that it has in terms of CAPEX. The interest level is very stable in Uruguay, and then, so with low interest in Uruguay, you can compensate the speed of wind, for example, that could be less intense than in Patagonia, for example, but the final product is still lower with the financing of the bank. So the most important, the challenge for Uruguay is to maintain the bank financing option. Okay, the transmission was interrupted. So let's resume, and then we can let Adam continue. So I will ask the question to the panel here. What are the challenges that Uruguay is facing today so that it's not left behind in this project, in this hydrogen project, and to be proud as we are with respect to the energy matrix transformation? Well, okay, there's Aram again. Sorry, I don't know what happened, but I give the floor to Juan Manuel. No, Adam, you can. Okay, Adam, you were mentioning about the challenge that Uruguay is facing, and then Juan Manuel will say a few words. So I don't know how much you heard about what I said. The interest in terms of financing through the banks is very low, and that can compensate higher costs that the project may have. So one of the challenges to face is to maintain that level of bank interest. That is going to be one of the advantages Uruguay can offer. So that's one of the reasons why we went to Uruguay to participate in this kind of projects. And the second element is the complementation aspect it has to export to the European Union. This element that aims at the European market in the countries of the European Union, they know what products they want, what quantities they want, the conditions of those products. And so this demand from the European Union is met by Uruguay. And for this, there is a definition that is very strong and what characteristics a green product have to meet those demands. And so, two or three elements of this are actually met by Uruguay, having availability of resources, green resources that can actually relate to generate this kind of product. There's also the labor laws actually complement, and there's also the availability of water in the country. So without going into detail, I would say that in Latin America, the complementary aspect of Uruguay is the highest that we have among all countries. So Aram, thank you very much for your comments and to see how Uruguay is positioned today. So I will give the floor to Juan Manuel with respect to the challenges and how to reach there in time. Okay, so I mentioned this before with respect to the urgency, because the world has its own timing and we cannot control that, but also to remind that hydrogen in Uruguay and has been present for several years already, even though now it's become more fashionable, but we've started talking about this for a while. And certainly after different governments in office, we will continue be talking about this. So a national policy that sets the rules, defines the rules, because part of this is already present. This is something very valuable that we should take care about. These are important aspects that Uruguay has to preserve to get on the wave of this project. Okay, I will continue talking about this, but I would like to thank you so much for your time and participation. Thank you for sharing your comments with us.
Gracias, Juan Manuel. Gracias, Juan Manuel.
Thank you, Juan Manuel. So now we're going to continue with the third forum of sustainable mobility. Remember, you can join us through the website of El País or the social media. Now we would like to invite Andrea Tutti, who is a coordinator from this project at UTE. So welcome, Andrea Tutti. She's the executive coordinator of the Intelligent or Smart Network project from UTE.
Sí, mejor. Bueno, ahora sí, bienvenida.
Okay. Welcome, Andrea.
Que sos la coordinadora ejecutiva
I was just
del proyecto de
mentioning
redes
that you are the
inteligentes de UTE.
executive coordinator
Hemos estado hablando a
of
lo largo de toda la
Smart
mañana de
Network
todos los desafíos que implica la
project
segunda
at
transformación
UTE.
energética.
We've been
Entonces,
talking
en
about
este
the
sentido, preguntarte
challenges
cuál es
of
el
this
rol que está
electric
teniendo UTE
transformation. So, what
siendo
is
una
the
de las
role
empresas
that
que está
UTE
liderando esta
is
transformación
having
también?
in this
Bien, primero que
transformation
nada, bueno,
since
muchas
it's
gracias por
leading
estar
it?
aquí,
So,
pero
first of
quería
all,
un
thank you very
segundo
much for
solo
the invitation.
saludar
Just
en nombre
1
de Silvia
second,
Emaldi, la ingeniera Silvia
in the
Emaldi, la
name of
presidenta de UTE, que realmente
Silvia
hubiera querido estar
Emaldi, the
presente acá,
president of UTE,
ocupando
that
este
she
lugar, o
wanted
sea,
to
tenía todo
be
organizado
present
para estar hoy
today.
acá y
She
un
had
cambio
her
de
agenda
una
program
agenda
for
muy
this,
complicada que tenía,
but there was a
hizo que hoy no
change,
pudiera estar acá, pero
and so
realmente
she
era su
was not
intención
able to
acompañarnos en este evento
attend
tan
the event.
importante para UTE. Y sí, como tú decías, UTE fue
Yes,
líder en
as
lo
you
que fue la
mentioned,
primera
UTE
transformación
has
energética. Hoy
been
estamos
a
en un país
leading company in
ejemplo en
the
el mundo, en un
first
país donde el
energy
95%
transformation.
de la
We
energía,
are
salvo condiciones
in a country
excepcionales,
that
de
is a
energía eléctrica
model
proviene
for
de
the
fuentes
world, where
de origen renovable.
95%
Y eso la
of
verdad
the
que es algo
energy
único. Hoy
come from
varias veces, y
renewable
además con la rapidez
sources.
que
This
es
is
esa
unique,
transición, ¿no? Hoy
and
durante
especially the speed
varios de los
that
expositores comentaron,
transformation
bueno, si en el
took
mundo se
place.
dice que el transporte
So
ocupa el
in the world, it
25% de lo
says
que
that
son, es el responsable del
transportation
25% de las
occupies
emisiones de dióxido de
or is
carbono a nivel del sector
responsible for
energía,
25%
en
of
Uruguay
the
ese porcentaje
carbon
de
gas
25 sube a un
emissions.
60 o
In
más por ciento, y
Uruguay,
si miramos el
that
transporte, el
is
98% en el transporte
60%,
equivale a
and
viene del transporte terrestre. Entonces, eso sumado
98%
a nuestra matriz
actually
energética,
is from land
las posibilidades de llevar
transportation.
las
So
energías limpias
the
al
possibilities
transporte
to
público y al transporte en
shift
general, sin
transportation
duda va
into cleaner
directamente a
energies
impactar en lo
is
que es los compromisos
directly
de
going to
descarbonización y los
impact
objetivos de
the
descarbonización del país.
commitments
Me gustaría
on
comentarte primero qué
decarbonization.
hemos
So
hecho, dónde
first,
estamos
I would
parados ahora
like
este
to
momento, y
mention
después
what
quizás
we've
los
done and
desafíos
where
que
we
todavía
are
quedan
today,
por
and then
delante.
the challenges
UTE
ahead.
tiene el objetivo de,
UTE
para
has
decirlo
the
corto y contundente,
objective,
de hacer
just to
viable la
be
movilidad
concise,
eléctrica en el país.
to
Y
make
eso implica
electric
muchas cosas.
mobility
Uno de los
viable, and
pilares
that
tiene que
implies
ver, bueno,
several
con la
aspects.
infraestructura
One
de
of the
carga
pillars
a
has
nivel
to
de vía
do with
pública, ¿no?
the
Quizás sea una de las
load
primeras barreras que nos
infrastructure
encontramos en el
in
desarrollo de la
terms
movilidad,
of
ese, yo lo llamaría hasta
public
mito
ways,
de la
charging,
autonomía, ¿no?
the charging
En
infrastructure.
realidad, la
Maybe
mayor
this is a
parte de las
myth,
personas que van a tener
but
vehículos
actually
eléctricos
most of
van a
the
cargar
people who are going to
en
have
su
electric
hogar y
vehicles,
no van
they
a
will
necesitar en
actually
la
charge
mayor
them
parte
at
de,
home,
su
and they will,
vida,
and
digamos,
most of the time, they won't
la red de
need
carga pública.
this
En el caso del transporte, que hoy
network
apuntábamos la
of
importancia de
charging
pensar en el
facilities.
transporte
In the
público,
case
en
of
el transporte de uso intensivo,
transportation, of
sí
public
se vuelve
transportation or intensive
importante
use,
contar con esta
yes,
red
it's
y con la
important
confianza en esa
to
red.
have
UTE
this
hoy tiene
charging network and
176 puntos
to
de carga
rely on it.
distribuidos en todo el país, en
UTE has
95 estaciones, en
176
65
charging
localidades, en los
spots
19 departamentos
in
del país.
65
Esto,
different
créanme que
locations
es
in the
mucho,
country.
y los objetivos
So
para
this
este
is a
año
lot,
es terminar
believe me, and the
densificando
objective
esa red,
for this
llegar de
year is to
176 a 300
intensify
puntos
this
de
and
carga,
go from
con un fuerte foco
176
en lo que es
to
la carga
300
rápida o la carga en corriente
charging
continua, que
stations
pensamos incorporar más
and
de 100 puntos
focusing
de carga en la
on
red,
fast
enfocados
charging
a la
and
carga rápida.
continuous
Así
charging.
que este sin duda ha sido uno de los
So
objetivos, y UTE es un
this
poco el
has been
viabilizador y
one of
el
the
que ha podido
objectives,
realizar la inversión para que esto
and
sea
UTE
posible,
has
y es uno de
made
los
this
focos.
possible.
Otro de los pilares que me gustaría comentar es
Another
que esto de movilidad
pillar
eléctrica
that I
estamos
want
hablando
to
de un
mention is
ecosistema de
that
movilidad eléctrica.
we're talking about
Hoy
an
escuché a
ecosystem
varios
of electric
panelistas, no me atrevo a decir
mobility.
el
Today,
100%, pero varios
I
de
was
ellos
listening
hablaron de
to
UTE.
several
Trabajamos con
panelists
UTE en esto, hicimos esto
speakers
con UTE,
who
y
mentioned
es así.
UTE
Nosotros hemos
somehow.
trabajado y
We
formado
worked
parte
with
de un
UTE
montón de grupos
in this project.
interinstitucionales,
We have
con
worked
Miki hablar con el Ministerio de Energía,
and
con la Dirección de
participated
Energía,
in
con las
different
intendencias
kinds of
departamentales. UTE
projects
tiene,
within
el año pasado terminó el
municipalities,
convenio
with
con
other
las
ministries.
19 departamentos, 19
We
intendencias de
signed
los
agreements
distintos
with the
departamentos para
municipalities
lograr
of the 19
densificar y poner
departments
puntos de carga en espacios
to
públicos. Hoy en el interior del
intensify
país
the
básicamente estamos
the
en estaciones de
installation
ANCAP.
or
La idea
setup
es
of
llegar en todo el
charging
país también con
spots
espacios
in
públicos, en
different
Montevideo
public
también, ¿no?
spaces.
Bueno, ANCAP, otro socio, otro
ANCAP
componente
is
de
another
este ecosistema de
component
movilidad. Pero después hemos
in this
trabajado con
ecosystem, but
el
we
Banco de
have also
Seguros para lo
worked
que es
with
viabilizar,
the
poner puntos de carga
insurance
sus
bank
instalaciones, pero además
to
beneficios a nivel de
install
seguro
these
de los
charging
vehículos eléctricos,
stations, but
convenios con
also
el Banco
benefits
de la
in
República
terms
para
of offering
lograr
benefits
financiación, no
for
solamente para lo que es compra de vehículos
electric
eléctricos, sino que
vehicles.
cargadores de
Also,
vehículos
we have
eléctricos,
worked
y podría
with
seguir
the
nombrando
Bank
muchos
of the
otros
Republic
organismos, o sea
to
que el trabajo
finance
hacia
the
los
purchase of this
organismos y
kind
hacia
of
ese
vehicles.
ecosistema de UTE es
So,
muy fuerte, de la universidad también,
UTE
para
has
lograr tener en el país las
had
capacidades necesarias
a
para
very
seguir
important
avanzando
role
en este
in this
desarrollo de la movilidad eléctrica.
ecosystem
Así que ese es
to
otro
continue
pilar
developing
importante en lo que
towards
venimos
this
trabajando.
transformation.
Después,
So
la
that's
experiencia de
another
usuario.
important
La
pillar we've
experiencia de
been working
usuario,
on.
créanme
Then
que
the
es otra barrera
experience
en el
of the
desarrollo de la
user.
movilidad eléctrica.
This is a
UTE ha
barrier
desarrollado
in the
sistemas,
electric
en el
mobility.
sitio web
UTE
de
has
UTE, en
developed
la app, que ustedes
systems
pueden tener todo
in our
encontrar en cualquier
website
tienda.
and
Tenemos
in
todos
the
los
app.
puntos de carga que están en el
You'll
país, su
find
disponibilidad,
all the
qué
charging
características
stations
tienen, qué tipos de
in
conectores
the
tienen.
country,
Y
what
bueno, la
connectors they
misión
have, have, what kind of availability. So the idea is to increase increase this availability. I mean, any foreigner who can come to the country can actually use this charging spots without being a consumer of UTE. And if the person is a consumer of UTE, they can include that charging in their utility bill every month. And the idea is to continue incorporating other private stakeholders. The UTE's own fleet, we have more than 95 electric vehicles, and this is also a challenge in terms of the fleet of the state. Of course, in terms of public transportation, this is something that has to be done. The fleet of many companies is, I mean, turning them into electric fleets is something that is a challenge. So these are some of the pillars that UTE has been moving forward in this respect. And of course, we have new challenges ahead. But first of all, I want to ask you something. We were talking with private sector companies involved in this respect, and those 176 charging stations have been financed by UTE, and you want to increase that to reach 300. So what do you think the private sector has to do in this respect? UTE is the one that has acquired the equipment, and we have financed them fully. The ones that we are acquiring now that allow for continuous charging, that can be done in a shorter period of time. Those type of equipment cost about $45,000. Without any doubt, it was essential to have the role of UTE in this part. But of course, it's time to have other stakeholders to intensify and enlarge this network. There are several actions that have been taken place from the Ministry of Energy, but maybe there were some changes involved. By the end of last year, there was a guideline issued by the ministry defining some roles in terms of electric mobility. One is the operator of charging stations, and there is another role to provide services for electric mobility, the ones who interact with the user. The user can start charging, and those roles can actually be occupied by the private sector. Now, UTE is occupying those roles. And in addition to this definition of roles, UTE has also promoted products for private operators who want to operate the charging stations. And it could be a reduction of the connection rate, benefits regarding the charging power. So these are benefits that are offered to the private stakeholders in case they want to run this charging stations. And of course, the benefits can increase with time. So what are we asking in return? We want these charging stations to be fast with continuous current, that they can be easily accessible to the public. And another request we are making is this interoperation status. We are thinking about concepts that maybe with a cell phone or the credit card, we already have the roaming set up. I mean, if I go abroad, I go to another place, I can withdraw money. So that interoperation nature is essential to incorporate private networks, that the user can go to any network, any equipment or facility that is part of a private network or not, without having to download different apps. So this interoperation nature that will actually result in providing a better and an easier experience for the user. So this is a challenge to incorporate other charging networks to the country.
Antes de seguir eso, quería
So
volver un poquitito para atrás con esto que me
before,
hablabas de la
I just want to
interacción con
go
los
back a
privados.
little
¿Cómo
with
sería o cómo
about
está
to talk about the
planteando UTE
interaction
hoy
with the
ese
private
modelo de
sector.
negocios con ellos?
How is
Para
UTE
invitar a inversiones de
thinking or
privados a ser
what is
operadores
UTE
de carga? ¿Se les
proposing
paga
to
un fee?
invite the private sector to be part of this? Are they paid a fee? They have to develop their own business models, and we expect that investment when an operator wants to start working. They need investment in the equipment, and what we provide is like the benefits in terms of the energy they use. The idea is to reduce the cost that connection to the grid involves, so they can define their own business models. We know they are working with a shopping mall because it's a place that is the ideal one for having charging stations. When we talk about charging networks, we're talking about having them with the right appropriate connectors at the right places, at the right location. Maybe the power they need is different depending on the location they are set, because at a shopping mall the charging is going to take shorter. So we have to think about the different type of business models depending on the different opportunities in terms of the charging network. We were talking about where UTE is positioned today, and what can we think and what can we expect in terms of initiative. Okay, on one hand, the investment on the charging network that we are expecting to invest, the development of platforms to enable this interoperation. Another challenge is to think about the fees. Today, the fee is very convenient, the rates are very convenient with benefits for those who have an intensive use, such as taxi drivers, but it doesn't contemplate all the things that electric mobility implies, because it's not the same if I have to buy a continuous current equipment than an alternate one. The space in some places can be something that involves different costs. I mean, in the current rate, we're not thinking about the time, because if an electric vehicle does not use this efficiently and withdraws the vehicle when it reaches 80% of the charge, it's occupying a spot that should be used by another one and is not using their network efficiently. That's another challenge. And also to expect this rate to generate benefits for other stakeholders. So that's the challenge we are facing. And of course, the network in terms of the fleet of the state is something that we should consider to continue incorporating electric vehicles to the fleet of the state. Andrea, thank you very much for your time. Let's invite José Luis Alonso, Director of ANCAP, to close this panel and this forum.
Ahí viene José Luis.
Okay, José Luis is coming.
Bienvenido.
¿Qué tal? Muchas gracias.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Permiso.
Adelante. José Luis, veníamos hablando
José Luis,
con Andrea de los desafíos que implica
Andrea and I were talking
para
about the
UTE
challenges
la segunda
for
transformación
UTE
energética. Hoy temprano
with this
hablábamos con el
second
presidente de ANCAP,
energy
Alejandro Stepanisic,
transformation. Early
sobre
this
estos
morning,
mismos desafíos y los
Mr.
proyectos
Stepanisic was
que
talking
ya
about the
están en
same
carpeta y en los que ya se
challenges
está
and the projects
trabajando
that are
para
already
que, lo que decía Juan Manuel Marcán
undergoing.
recién, para que Uruguay
And
pueda
so that Juan Manuel
subirse
Mercan
a este
mentioned
tren a
this, so that
tiempo.
Uruguay
¿Cómo está
can jump
trabajando
on the
ANCAP? ¿Cuáles
wagon
son los
on
principales
time.
desafíos
So how is NCAP
de esta
working on
transformación?
this? What are the main
Bueno,
challenges of this transformation?
algunos de los presentes y los que estén siguiendo esta transmisión
Well,
se preguntarán
some of you here and those
qué
following
tanto
it
tiene que
online
hacer o qué tanto tiene por
may
hacer
ask,
o qué puede aportar
how
una compañía
much
que históricamente
can
se ha
a
ocupado
company
de
that
proveer
has
de
historically been
derivados
in
fósiles,
charge
¿verdad?
of providing fossil fuels
Pues a esa pregunta quiero responder, que
be
responde de
doing
paso tu
with this?
consulta.
Maybe I'd like to answer that
No
question.
podemos
That
dejar
will
de
also cover
tener en
your
cuenta
question.
a una compañía que ha participado
We need
activamente
to
como facilitador y
remember that
proveedor
it's a
del
company
principal
that
elemento para
has
tener
actively
movilidad.
participated as a facilitator of the
Esta
main element
compañía,
to have
ANCAP, es
mobility.
una
This
compañía
company,
que es un
ANCAP,
organismo vivo, no se detiene
is,
ni
is,
se
is a
sostiene
live
con solo una
organization. It's
actividad.
not going to stop, or it's
Entonces,
not,
voy a dar un
it
breve
doesn't depend
pantallazo
on just one
de
activity. So I'm
cómo
going to
nuestra
give a
civilización
brief overview of
está
how
pasando
our
de un concepto de
civilization
movilidad
is
que es
going from a concept
excluyente
of mobility that's
porque
excluding
invade toda nuestra actividad
because it
a un
goes in
concepto de
all of
movilidad
our
sostenible.
activities to a concept
Y
of
cuando pasamos
sustainable
del concepto de
mobility.
movilidad en general a movilidad sostenible,
When we talk
nos
about the
viene a la
concept
mente
of
enseguida
mobility, sustainable
qué tan
mobility, the first thing
sostenible
that
puede
comes to our
ser
mind is
una movilidad si
how
utilizamos
sustainable
combustibles
can
de
it
origen
be
fósil.
if we use fossil fuels?
Entonces eso nos
So
cuestiona qué tan maduras están
this
el resto de las
is
tecnologías para
making us question
abastecer
ourselves, like
el
how
total de
mature
requerimiento
are the
energético
rest
que el
of
mundo tiene.
technologies to provide the total energy
Y no están lo
requirements in the
suficientemente
world?
maduras porque no tienen
And
la
they are
capacidad
not
actual de
mature enough
proveer
because
todo el
they don't
requerimiento
have
energético.
the
Esa es una verdad
capacity
innegable,
today to
¿verdad?
provide all the energy requirements.
Pero ANCAP quiere ser partícipe de esta
But
transformación.
ANCAP wants to be part
Y
of
de
this
hecho,
transformation.
de las tres
And
líneas
in
principales que hoy
fact,
se aplican
out of the
en
three
movilidad en el
main
mundo,
lines that are applied to
una
mobility
es
in the
la
world,
movilidad eléctrica, en
one
el
is
sentido
electrical
amplio
mobility
y simple que la conocemos, que es con
in
soporte
the
de
widest
acumuladores eléctricos de
meaning,
baterías.
that is with batteries.
Eso se está imponiendo, pero en América
That's
Latina es
little
un
by little being
1%.
imposed, but in Latin America, it's just 1%.
¿Puede haber un salto
We might have
importante? Sí, lo puede
an
haber.
important
Porque la
jump,
actual la
but
primigenia tecnología
that
que
can happen
coexistió
because the
en movilidad era vapor,
technology that was
eléctrica
used
y a
for
combustibles
mobility was
fósiles. Se
steam,
impuso
electricity, and fossil fuels.
la movilidad por combustibles fósiles.
Fossil fuel mobility sort
Pero
of gained
renace la tecnología
momentum
eléctrica
and was imposed.
con
But then
la posibilidad de
electric
acumular en base
technology
a
arises
litio.
again
El
based
mundo no
on
está preparado
the
ni
possibility
tiene
of
la
accumulating
suficiente cantidad de ese
lithium.
producto para abastecer la
And the
demanda.
world is not prepared and doesn't have enough of that product to meet the demand.
Pero la tecnología siempre
However,
ha sabido
technology has
venir en apoyo de cubrir
always
las necesidades.
come to
Hoy, por
help
ejemplo,
our needs. So
nosotros
today, for
estamos aquí
example,
y en
we're
China
here,
se están
and right now in
estableciendo
China,
16 fábricas para transformar las
16
tecnologías de
factories are being
electrificación
set up to
en automoción.
transform
16.
electrification
¿Saben qué?
technologies
En una
in
primera etapa va a ser
automobiles.
compartida
So,
litio-sodio.
you know what? At the first stage is going to
Entonces,
be
los cambios
shared,
se están
lithium and
produciendo a un
sodium.
ritmo más vertiginoso
So
de lo que
changes
apreciamos. Nosotros
take
vemos lo
place
que se
faster
trasluce nada
than
más.
what we
Pero hay
can
una generación y una
understand. We only
efervescencia
see what is
que
translated,
está avanzando muy rápidamente y
but it's
que
burgeoning.
los
It's
usuarios
moving
normales
really fast.
desconocemos.
And regular
Ese
users,
es
we don't know about it.
un área que cubre un requerimiento. Después hay otra
That's an area
tecnología
that covers one of their requirements.
que también
There's
está
another area,
madura
technology.
y que se
It's also
está
mature
imponiendo o tratando
and
de imponer
that
y
it's
ocupar su espacio, que son las
taken its
tecnologías de
space,
hidrógeno, en especial
and
hidrógeno
those are
verde.
hydrogen technologies, especially green hydrogen.
¿Son nuevas estas tecnologías? No.
These technologies are
En la
new?
década del
No, they're not
80, una
new.
compañía automotriz estuvo
In the
andando por
80s,
Europa vehículos
one
con
car
hidrógeno.
company had
Lo que
cars
pasa
that were
que todo es un
run
tema de costos también.
with
Es un
hydrogen
tema
in
de
Europe.
redes de
But of
distribución
course, this has
y
to
es un
do with
tema de
costs,
capacidad de los
with
compradores
distribution
de
network,
adquirir el producto.
with
Y son
capacity of
temas de
the
seguridad
buyers to
también.
buy one product,
Pero hoy,
and also with
5 décadas después,
security issues.
o 4 décadas después,
So
es una
today,
tecnología madura
50 years later or
y
40
que está
years
tomando
later,
su espacio.
this technology is mature and
Y
it's
la tercera
gaining
tecnología son los
terrain.
e-fuels,
And the
los
third technology
electrocombustibles.
is
¿Y ustedes saben por qué se llaman
e-fuels.
electrocombustibles?
Do you know why
Se
they're
llaman
called
electrocombustibles
electrofuels?
no por el producto en sí
Because,
que es un combustible.
not because of the
Se
product
llaman
itself that's a
electrocombustibles por
fuel.
la forma en que se
They're called
conciben y por
electrofuels
cómo se
because of the
conforman.
way they're
Se
conceived,
utiliza
how
energía
they're
eléctrica
formed.
para,
We
a
use
través de la
electric
hidrólisis
energy,
del agua,
so
aprovechar
through
el hidrógeno
hydrolysis of water,
y unirlo con el CO2
we take advantage of hydrogen,
y tener
we
metanol,
combine it with
por
CO2,
ejemplo.
and we get methanol, for example.
Estas son las tres principales líneas que hoy tiene la humanidad para
Those
enfrentar el
are the
desafío de
three
continuar
main
siendo una
lines that
civilización
humanity has
que se mueve.
today to face the challenge
Y en las tres
of
participan
a civilization that keeps moving. And in the three that I've mentioned, ANCAP is present. We've been cut off.